Everyone has that button. It's right there.
I'm looking at the wrong window. On a similar note, guys, how much editing do you do for these kind of conversations?
I edit them.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to re-say something, by all means, it won't come out in the end.
No, I appreciate. I'm trying. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've been listening to your past episodes. So, do you want to focus mostly on the fiction podcasting adaptation process, or do you want it to be more generalized about my background, or like what's the best for your audience?
I'm going to wing it.
Just from an audio standpoint, I hear your voice is great when you're looking right at that mic. So if you could either pull it closer or something.
How's that?
That'd be great.
Is my audio okay, Michelle?
Well,
It's just whatever. It is what it is. I'm sorry. I don't have a radio voice.
no, you're fine.
Voice for silent movies, as they say.
All right, go ahead.
We'll start it off right now. This is How the Arts Were Won. Burning through episodes this year. It's August. We're shooting for an 8-episode year. That's we're there. We're only like a couple months behind.
It's what happens when you're busy and I'm so busy and we have actually full lives. That's what happens. So people should be worried if we're at episode 58 or something right now.
Yeah. What are we, some losers with a podcast? We have Alex Blumberg on today, who is a writer who previously placed in Script Pipeline's TV writing competition multiple times with 2 different scripts. I'll let him explain the sci-fi Russian thriller thing. And then another script called Backfires, which is loosely based, I believe. I don't know. I'll have to ask him about that as well. Loosely based on a true story about inmates who were used as firefighters, to put it very, very simply. He turned that pilot into a scripted podcast, and I have 1,000 questions for him, but we'll hit upon the broad strokes and go from there. Alex Blumberg.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I'm really excited to be here, and I think you summarized it nicely.
Oh, good. 4th grade level summary. It's it's about fires and prisoners.
I think, I've been told if you can't summarize it in a simple way and explain it to a child, then maybe you don't know your story well enough. So
you know what? That's true. That's true. And the best pitches, the easiest pitches that, the easiest for me when we go out to industry with scripts and stuff are the ones that I'm like, it's 8 words. You totally get it. You get the conflict. You get the implied drama and all that. So that is true. I'm going to stick to my 4th grade level pitches. Michelle, I don't have Alex's bio in front of me if you want to take a gander at it and read it in your best radio voice, Michelle.
Sure. Do you say Blumberg or Bloomberg?
I say Blumberg, although I've been told by my dad, who's an immigrant from Latvia, that it was actually Bloomberg in the old country.
It is Bloomberg.
I go by Blumberg now that we're American.
Okay. American Alex Blumberg is an award-winning screenwriter, documentary filmmaker, and podcast producer. He's written narration for the likes of Helen Mirren and Meryl Streep, and documentary features about endangered species and ecological recovery. Sounds very exotic. Your environmental film, Escape from Extinction, won the 2020 Doc LA Award for Best Environmental Film and is now streaming on Peacock. Alex's 5-part scripted podcast, Backfires, which we're going to be talking about today, was released in 2024 on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and I have to say, it's phenomenal. Before moving to LA, Alex was based in Prague because he worked as a video journalist for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. I will stop there and we can dive into this very rich background and history of yours.
Yeah, I mean, where should we start?
Well, I was going to save this for last, but I actually want to kick it off with this question. You wrote Backfires as a pilot. I would assume heavily researched pilot. It felt very authentic to me, very grounded. It hit some walls, right? Because the industry is not clamoring to produce a period TV series in the last couple of years from an unproduced writer. Why did you decide to make it a scripted podcast, and also kind of walk us through what were the early stages of kind of pulling things together as far as cast and as far as learning how to do it, or did you already know how to do it?
I did not know how to do it. I am very much a visually oriented person. My writing style is typically very visual, very prose heavy. So it was definitely a challenge. It was not something that was on my radar initially, but I guess it came as a result of placing high in a few contests and, getting that, you get that surge of adrenaline and that surge of excitement after you win a contest or two, or you place high in a competition like Script Pipeline. And then, like a lot of people in this business, you get close, but not close enough. And you feel kind of frustrated and gatekept. And I guess I would trace it back to the Austin Film Festival in 2022, which is a great festival for anyone who hasn't been there. Even if you're not placing high, I really recommend checking out Austin because it's so educational. But I attended a panel with the speaker. The speaker was an actress, journalist, and podcaster named Carly Rowland. She has a very successful true crime journalism podcast called Marginalized Murder, The Case of the 51. So I want to shout that out because Carly is the one who kind of first put the bug in my ear. I approached her after her panel, which was about podcasting, actually journalism, nonfiction podcasting. But as I was thinking about it, given the subject matter of Backfires and how that is inspired by this real life program, it's historical fiction, I thought she would find it interesting subject matter wise. And we started chatting. And she was the first person to say, look, if you're seeing these hurdles, I think the story sounds really promising for the audio medium, and period stuff in particular, it's not going to have the same kind of production obstacles and not going to have the same kind of easy no's, if you know what I mean, right? Like this is too expensive. There's too many characters, especially if you come from a filmmaking background, if you know how to edit like I do, if you're not intimidated by the technology, that can be a really good way to create a piece of IP, create a piece of media for yourself. That's your story coming to life, and you can take it directly to an audience, directly to the listeners, which I, would love to get into more detail later, but that has been a really interesting journey versus just having a script that you think is good and that you believe in, but you're taking these meetings and, everyone's your best friend in a meeting and then you never hear from them again. There's a lot of frustrations to being a writer in this industry. And it's just been really empowering, to have the story and to see it resonating with people and just even engaging with them directly on platforms like Reddit, for example, which I can get into more detail. But I think in general, the medium feels more democratic, more meritocratic, if that's the right word. I want to say also that I am not a fiction podcasting expert. I'm a documentary filmmaker and writer. This is my first foray into the audio drama world, and I'm definitely trying to come at it from a place of humility and open-mindedness and learning. But I think if you're a writer and you're willing to do that work and come at it with curiosity and, engage with fans, see what people are looking for, there is actually a really dedicated fan base out there around the world of people who really love audio dramas, long form, full cast. And that's kind of surprised me, in the age of social media and TikTok, we all, it's like a cliche. We all hear about how attention spans are ever dwindling, but the show's been out for 3 months. And from what I'm seeing, there is a very healthy appetite, not just in this country, but around the world for long form audio dramas from people from very different walks of life for different reasons. But I think
that wild too?
Yeah. The demand is there.
Yeah. I just bought a record player. This is unrelated, but very much related. I just bought a record player the other week. And I don't think I've held a record in 30 years, but I think it's evolutionary for middle-aged men to start buying watches and record players and whatever. But bought a record player. So I kind of dove into the record world, and it's well, who's listening to records? And the answer is lots of people are listening to records, hundreds of millions of people. And you don't really realize that, I don't call them alternative forms of technology because the records have been around forever, but there's still divisions of people that are flocking to these other things. It's not all about social media. It's not all about, what's streaming. And I had the same reaction when I started talking to audio podcasters and people who wrote scripts for audio podcasts and seeing some of our former finalists and even winners adapting their work or getting hired on scripted podcasts as a form of getting paid for their writing. Right. So I've been beating on this horse, beating on this drum. It's violent, beating on this drum for a long time, of how, we're living in a world now where if you want to be a TV writer, that's fine. You continue trying to be a TV writer, but the landscape is such where if that door closes, it's not like your career is over with and that story will never be told. There's so many alternative mediums to tell it. It's a podcast, or maybe you adapt it into a screenplay, or it's a book, or it's a comic book or something, or a graphic novel, right? And I think that's a good thing. I think that I wouldn't say it's a way to get around the gatekeepers, because there's gatekeepers in everything to some extent, right? But it's very inspiring to me to see someone like you taking their pilot and not shelving it and saying, well, we tried, and you shrug, but continuing to push it because you believe in that story, you know?
I do. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it would be, I'm not going to lie. Like, I also made Backfires as a way for myself to have some tangible IP, tangible media property to show someone. But I think that in itself is good for us as writers. Like, yes, we have our portfolio of written material, but there's a lot of good writers in this town, in this country, and in this world. And to stand out, I mean, I'm inspired by my friends and fellow filmmakers who, let's say when you're writing a feature, for example, I'm paraphrasing a good friend of mine who's shooting his feature right now, but it's kind of an old school approach to say, oh, I just need to keep revising this feature script for 10 years until it's perfect. Like, why not make part of it now and use part of that as proof of concept? Why not? You know, it's easier than ever today.
We've had writers, and I don't know if it really helped them get signed. It kind of didn't, but at least they have that sort of IP. They've turned their feature scripts into like a short story. They took a sliver of it and wrote a short story of it. And for a few of them, we published it on Pipeline Artists. And now they have that other form to kind of send to people. And we know, like, in the last 2 years, how many production companies and studios and stuff have been optioning short stories, right? So again, I think it's a testament that you could find ways around the industry to get back into the industry, which feels like a backwards way of doing things. But when it comes to producing the actual podcast, and when it comes to the casting, because when I started listening to it, it took me like a very short amount of time, maybe 60, 90 seconds, to kind of get my footing and the tone, because I didn't think it would be that so dramatic, I guess, which should have been obvious because it's a drama podcast. But once you do, it's legitimately like riveting, and I was so invested. I'm only 3 episodes in, but it's what do you credit most of that to? Is the casting part of it really, really crucial?
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that about the show. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And yeah, the casting process is super crucial, just as it is in filmmaking. And this was really fun for me too, to get back into, you know, narrative production in a sense, you know, get in the studio. And I think especially we did all the recording over the course of last year, 2023. But I think especially coming out of the, you know, post-pandemic years, yes, this medium, it's good. You can record people remotely. You can have actors all over the country over Zoom. But a lot of my film and TV actors here in Los Angeles were just really jumping to get into the studio and work with each other and respond to each other. And that was really fun to be around as well. And, you know, the casting aspect, I think for audio is even, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's more important. It's as important as casting for film, but there's a different dimension to it because, I mean, you guys know this, you read a lot of scripts, but on paper, you want all your characters to sound distinct when they speak, right? You should be able to cover up the character's name and know who's delivering a certain line of dialogue. But I think that becomes even more important in audio drama via the writing and the casting, because all these voices have to be distinct so they don't get kind of muddied up in your ear and in your mind. And they have to work well together, kind of like, it's almost like different instruments in an orchestral composition, right?
Absolutely.
So I tried to, you know, in some ways that forced some adaptations of the story that I didn't have, you know, forced me to make some changes to some aspects of the story that I didn't initially have in mind when I had written it for the screen. There's one character, Sweden Nelson, who's a forest ranger, who I initially imagined as a young man, younger than myself, like in a perfect world, played by a Bo Burnham type. But now when I was making the show, I'm like, I have too many young men in the show. Like, we can't all sound the same. So I aged him up significantly and made him a much older man.
Because of the voice difference? So you'd have that dynamic? Oh,
because I had access. I reached out to a audiobook narrator named Joe Barrett, who's a very accomplished audiobook narrator. He did A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. He did a couple other pretty big name titles. And he has this really distinct kind of gritty, almost like a grittier Wallace Shawn type voice, but it definitely doesn't sound like a 25-year-old, which is fine. But then I just kind of adapted to him because I wanted him in the story. So I had to then change the character as a response to him. So I don't know if that answers your question about casting.
Totally.
That's sort of like a fun give and take for that part of the process.
It answers two questions for me, and it's the other thing I kind of have been harping on too. It's like, are you a TV writer, or are you a screenwriter, or are you a storyteller? Because if you're a good storyteller, you should be able to adapt to different mediums and to kind of, evolve with whatever you need to evolve into, right? To make the story work and make it even better for whatever medium that might be, whether it's a play or a film or whatever.
Absolutely.
So that's great. I think Michelle had a question about.
No, I will, yes. But I want to talk more about the storyteller versus the scriptwriter versus the, all these other things, because
absolutely,
I recently had my own bit of epiphany about storytelling across these mediums. You know how they say, show, don't tell, right?
Right.
Okay. As I'm coming from a very novelist background, so, when you take these novel writing classes and you go to these conferences and stuff, they're always like, oh, show, don't tell, and all this jazz. And then I definitely had taken that to heart for the last 15 years. I had taken my screenplays and then I was adapting them to novel form. And for some reason, it just wasn't. I mean, it like the structure, the pacing, everything was good, but there was just something so wrong. And it took me years before I finally realized, and it hit me. It's like in novels and in those kind of just purely writing, or even the audio format, I think it's kind of all the same, because there's one input, really. There's one sensory input. When you're reading, it's words on a page, right? When you're listening to audio, it's one thing. When you're watching a movie, there's multiple sensory inputs. But so in the novel format, in the audio format, you are telling. There is no other way to do it. You are telling the freaking story. So tell in order to show. So that hit me super hard. And then I was like, oh my God. And then suddenly I was cutting left and right from a novel that I had, because I realized I don't need all of this, because this I would need if it was a visual format. I don't need it here. I can literally write 2 sentences and cover 10 pages.
Sure.
Because I am the narrator. I am telling the story. Everything in this book is me telling the story. Everything in your audio format story is you telling the story. So there's no question in there, but I kind of want to get your feedback on how you feel about that. And especially you going from being more of, like you said, a visual writer, which I was too, and I am, but how you translate that when you're thinking about just audio, when you're thinking about the blind medium, right? Which novels are too. I mean, they're both blind mediums. Thoughts are welcome.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really, really insightful point, and it was something that was constantly in my mind. And look, initially, I think for myself, at least, it can feel kind of unnatural. You have to do exposition sometimes in a way that feels a little more, hey, it's you again, character one. I mean, some of that you have to give to the audience so that they don't get lost and they don't that's the most, you can do all this great writing, but if I don't know who's talking in a certain scene, I don't know if that's ever happened with y'all in even reading a novel. There's sometimes I'll read a novel and it's long dialogue. I'm like, I've forgotten whose line this is. And maybe that's a reflection. Maybe that's a reflection of the writing
the
itself.
talking heads thing, right?
Well, that's when voice becomes so important. Right. Not literal voice, but the voice of that character, right?
Right.
Absolutely. But I think once you get past that, for those of us who are more prose inclined or visually inclined, it still opens up a new, a large world. And I think it comes back to subtext too. You can still have a lot of fun with how your characters are answering or not answering questions, and what they're, especially in the format I use for Backfires, to create sort of a narrator through line without resorting fully to an audiobook feel, reading narration, was to frame it as a series of interviews conducted by a journalist who's in the future, 30 years after the story that is set in 1946, the actual story of the prisoners living in this isolated mountain camp, fighting wildfires. 30 years later, there is a journalist who's interviewing survivors and their families, trying to get to the bottom of what she is discovering to be sort of a mass cover-up by the authorities at the camp. So I try to, in that sense, you can find a narrative structure that allows you to sneak in some of this exposition without, hopefully without being too heavy handed. I mean, that was my hope.
I didn't find it heavy handed at all. I found it like it listens. I almost said it reads like it listens like like an old timey sort of podcast that's been modernized, which I think was probably the vibe that you were going for and the vibe that works for this type of story. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what's so cool about this audio drama medium too. I mean, look, podcasting didn't reinvent the wheel. I mean, there was radio dramas almost as long as radio has been around, right?
That's what I was going to say.
I was talking to my papa, who lives in Oklahoma City, and he's not going to be 92 years old this year. And when I pitched him this story, he's like, "Oh yeah, radio dramas like Lone Ranger, Perry Mason,
right.
Little Orphan Annie." Like that's something that's really cool too. Like this is a super, it is a digital medium. People are listening on their phone, on these little pocket computers, on their iPhones. Right. But at the same time, the actual storytelling chops, you can learn a lot by going back. You can listen, go on YouTube and listen to old Perry Mason episodes, which I did. Yeah. So I did want that. And even the narrator, I do have a narrator in the show announcing the credits and reading the episode recaps and teasers. And he works for the Voice of America in Washington, D.C. And he has this great booming baritone that kind of reminded me of the old school radio narrators, right? The Lone Ranger, like previously on this episode,
he sounds like the guy from SNL for some reason.
Someone else told me that too, that he sounded like, what's the guy's name? Oh man, it's the guy who was Dr. Spachiman on 30 Rock, that guy.
Yeah.
Oh.
But anyway, yes, I did.
I'll have to look it up because it's not bothering me.
I did. I think especially for a period story, and we can get into this later, but I have a new project I'm developing for next year that I think Matt is familiar with. It's called Sister, that was in this year's script pipeline contest, that I think is even more fitting for this format because it takes place in the 1920s and it's centered around the birth of radio broadcasting in 1920s Los Angeles.
Sorry, I was going to tell you how much I liked it, but go ahead. I was going to rain praise upon you again, Mr. Blumberg. We really liked it. It's another one that's it's an expensive show and it's like nearly impossible. I don't think anything is impossible, but it's nearly impossible to really get picked up, especially the way TV is right now. But I'm reading it and knowing that you had turned Backfires into a podcast, I'm like, God damn, this is another great podcast. If you did a scripted podcast of it, because it's even more like lending itself to that medium, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I thank you for saying that. And I think even more so than Backfires, because yes, it would be if Sister, which is about a charismatic radio televangelist in the 1920s Los Angeles, loosely inspired by Amy Semple McPherson, if y'all are familiar with her. She's kind of been described as a sexy, singing, dancing, fundamentalist Marilyn Monroe who put on these elaborate. She built the world's first megachurch, which is the Angelus Temple right here in Echo Park, Los Angeles.
Really?
But she combined Hollywood theatrics with charismatic preaching, and was the only female in a very male-dominated world of Pentecostal evangelical Christianity, and she created this kind of initially created this multimedia empire.
Wow.
And kind of presaged the birth of Christian evangelical broadcasting in this country. But I think that would, it opens up these opportunities, or it opens up your imagination. Like if that were to be made as a TV show, it would have to be like directed by Damien Chazelle. It would have to be really big.
It's a big prestige show. Yeah, I totally get it. And that's why I'm like, this is an uphill climb for TV, but you never know if the right talent gets attached to it. You get a great actor/producer attached, that sort of route. Anything is possible. I don't want to be overly optimistic.
No, I understand what you're saying. And that's something I continue hearing. And I understand that. But at the same time, I believe in the story and I want to be true to myself. And I remember Sister actually was one of the first scripts that I got a nice, a big, well, not big, but that was recognized at a film festival. It won in 2022. It was awarded the best teleplay unproduced at the Sedona Film Festival. And the judge who selected it was a screenwriter named David Isaacs. He is currently, maybe he's retired now, but he was at that time the chair of the screenwriting department at USC. And his credits included MASH and The Simpsons and Cheers. And I think he worked on Mad Men for a couple seasons and was close with Matthew Weiner. But
He's a Fraser guy too, isn't he?
yes. And I was speaking to him after his panel at Sedona, and he was telling me and telling everyone else, like, you can't chase trends in the industry. Like, obviously things like you can see like what's hot right now and what's not hot right now. But ultimately, like, you have to write what's in your heart, and you have like that's going to come across if you really are connecting to the material versus you're trying to chase what you think the industry wants right now.
Right.
Because we all know how slowly things move in this business too. And you don't know what's going to be hot 5 years from now. And
Absolutely.
he was telling me about how Matthew Weiner, who was a friend of his, he had written that Mad Men pilot years before they even snuck back onto the HBO set after shooting the Sopranos episode and did an undercover shoot of that pilot. But it can be years. So that was even more of the reason to just, you have to write what you're passionate about. And given that my background is in documentary and history and science, like, I understand that a lot of the subject matter, like costume drama, it's expensive. That's going to turn people off. But I think the audio drama production is a good way to cut through that noise and to prove that the heart of it is the characters, the heart of the story, that what's going to work is who these characters are and how the choices they're making and how that can connect with an audience in a universal way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's continuing to draw me to this medium.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, that I want to stress for all writers, like, just because horror is hot and thrillers are hot doesn't mean that you should go out and write a horror or a thriller. It means you should write what speaks to you, that's going to feel authentic on the page, and that you're passionate about writing, because that's also going to show on the page. And let the industry kind of conform to you, which is really bad advice, but you have to do it. There's no other way to do it. Like, Michelle, would you go out and write a horror down the middle high concept feature tomorrow because it's hot? No, that's not what you write, right? So write what you write, and then be open-minded to other alternatives if that one specific
if the
thing doesn't work
opportunities
out.
present themselves, sure, take them, but you know, don't do it because you think it's going to be the thing that's going to get you somewhere, right?
That never works.
No, it never works. And Alex, like, I completely resonate with what you were saying. Like, you attain some level of success and some level of, like, attention, notoriety, or whatever, and then there's always this like ceiling that you eventually hit, and then there's like 1,000 of these gatekeepers that you have to deal with. But it's funny, when Matt had told me that we were going to interview you, and he said, he'd taken his script and turned it into a podcast. Of course, all my like alarms, sirens, I don't know, whatever the good version of alarm is.
Good sirens, yeah.
Bells. Bells. There you go. The bells were ringing because, I mean, I'm a podcaster, right? But I also had been having this vision for, this dream for a very long time to turn several of the things that I have done into audio format, but not audio book, right? Right. And even my nonfiction that I did, like, that was my goal had been to make it into this, because I have all these recordings of the interviews I did with people. I have all this audio that I've just saved, especially audio from like the 60s and 70s and 80s that was given to me. And I was just like, I would love to do a podcast drama, basically. But yeah, all that to say, like, I'm very much into this idea of, like, let's innovate beyond the bounds of Hollywood, right?
Totally.
Make Hollywood conform to us, because that is what's going to happen, because, like, podcasting, you were talking about it being a democratic medium. Absolutely. 1000%. Radio was not that way. There was this huge barrier to entry, but with podcasting, it's a lot cheaper. You can attain skills in a fairly short amount of time. Unlike, making short films and whatever, like, it takes money, right? But it doesn't take quite that much. If you've got good friends with good voices, great, go for it. But yeah, with podcasting, it started out being like this very indie thing. And then now look, like, we've got Spotify, we've got Google, we've got Apple, like, all of them trying to crowd in and platformize, this medium. And so now we have to, as podcasters, we have to keep innovating and keeping those people on their toes, like these big tech companies that are just like trying to take it back and undemocratize it. Is that a word? I don't know.
Well, that was one of my. I have a few quick wrap up questions for you, Alex. How was it financed?
It was crowdfunded, and I would say 80%. We did it with a relatively low budget, and about 80% of the budget, which was, I'd say, roughly around $10,000 for the 5 episodes for production, post, and marketing. About 80% of that was crowdfunded, and the rest of it was, from myself, from our family.
Yeah.
But I think, especially if you're used to film production budgets, I mean, that is a relatively small amount.
Yeah.
Sure.
And something else. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you, Matt.
No. Go ahead.
I want to add I think this is important for any writers who are looking to do this. SAG-AFTRA they now have podcast agreements. If you want to use SAG-AFTRA talent, there are specialized templated contracts that you can get from SAG and have your union cast fill out, where it's similar. It works in a similar way to the independent film agreements, but they are basically waiving you from SAG minimums so that you can freely negotiate a fee with your cast. And
that's great.
The vast majority of my cast is union, and they were still thrilled to participate, but it gives it that more of a it has more of a scrappy independent film feel, but we're still being above board.
With the professional. Yeah.
I have professional cast. I paid everyone. It was not what they're worth, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew that they were valued. And I'm not asking people to work for free. I worked for free, but I didn't ask anyone else to work for free. And I do think, for as democratic and as meritocratic as podcasting is, it's still work. It's still a lot, especially if you're directing it and producing it yourself and editing it yourself. I mean,
and investing in it yourself with your own actual money. Right. So.
And I wasn't even thinking about monetization at this point because I'm so new to the game. And I didn't do that. I didn't make this show to, I think my expectations, I tried to keep them. I just wanted this to live in the world and I wanted people to hear it. I wasn't making it with the expectation that I'm going to run ads in it and it's going to make $1 million and get me a deal or anything. Maybe hopefully that comes down the road from a future project. But again, I was trying to come at this from a place of humility as a first time podcaster.
Yeah.
Documentary filmmaker stepping into this world of audio, which I do think has a lot of overlap, right? I mean, especially in journalism and reportage, that's been around for a long time. And that was a fun aspect to kind of mix into the production of this too.
Yeah. Well, I think you definitely succeeded. It was wonderful to listen to as someone who is extremely critical of audio. And I've loved it so far. So
well, thank you, Michelle. And as you were describing some of your archive of interviews that you've collected, I think something that I'm really interested in doing, and it kind of goes off what you were saying about how do we continue to innovate in a really saturated space now, right? Podcasting is much more saturated than it was 10 years ago. It feels like everyone has a podcast, right? How do you stand out? Something I really am interested in doing is exploring this hybrid fiction, nonfiction space. So the story of Backfires is inspired by the real life California conservation camp program, but it's historical fiction. But the story of Amy Semple McPherson, for example, she was a radio preacher. There are recordings that exist of her speaking and giving sermons on her radio station.
Right.
Here, that was based here in Los Angeles. So part of my hope for the future for my next project, Sister, that I want to adapt would be to have this fictionalized element, but I'm exploring how I can sort of incorporate some of these documentary elements as well. I don't know if that's as bonus material or if that's maybe maybe there's a
way to integrate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or something. One of my favorite historical shows of all time was Band of Brothers, the HBO World War II series. And something that I loved about, every episode of Band of Brothers started with an interview with a veteran. Yeah. Someone who was actually at the Battle of Bastogne, for example. And he's talking about that. And then in a very cinematic way, it cuts to our fictionalized scene of the battle. Right. So I think that's something that could be cool for podcasting as well.
Absolutely. I think that's really brilliant. But it also reminds me of what they have tried to do already with, shows like the Romanovs, because I'm not saying that was historically accurate or anything like that. I'm not commenting, but that sort of thing where they're having real people, commenting on the actual history, and then they're having a dramatized version of it too, right? Yeah. Having that all integrated is interesting.
Does this mean that Sister is going to be next up on the Alex Blumberg podcast rotation?
I think so. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and do the writing. This is my plan. I've been, kind of, maybe I'll get you guys' opinion on this, but I don't want to self-finance it again. I kind of feel like the crowdfunding thing, you can do that once, and after that, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just, I've been talking to other filmmakers about that, and I think it's one thing to do that for your first audio project, but I do have I want to hold myself to a higher goal for Sister. I want to do it right. So I'm going to do the writing regardless. I've recently joined a LA-based independent filmmaking collective called Film Shop, and I'm going to be workshopping the audio adaptation of Sister this fall as part of this new writers group that I've joined. But in terms of the production, yeah, my short answer is yes. I very much want to make it, but I'm not going to be self-financing it again. I want to, pitch it to some producers who I know or some outlets and try to find a way to make this properly so I can pay people properly and do it with a little bit of a higher production value, maybe some music production. But I very much want this. I really believe in the story. I think it would be a really effective. I think the audio medium would be a very effective way to tell this story.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's my hope. So I'm going to be working hard on making that into a reality over the next year.
You should. I'd encourage you to check out the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities, because they both have media focused grants. And I think especially with what you were talking about, because it's about something real, you could definitely, I think, secure a grant that way. So
like, hey, this is historically important and people need to know this story.
Yeah.
Get the grant, right?
Yeah, because like for the National Endowment for the Humanities, they want stories that are told in really creative ways that are relevant to society, to history, to some aspect of humanities, right? Which is, so humanities is super broad. Like you could do anything. In this case, you're talking about a religious movement. So I think you'd have a really good shot, actually.
Well, that's a great recommendation. Thank you for suggesting. I'm definitely going to look into that.
Yeah.
Alex Blumberg. It's good to talk to you, buddy.
You said Bloomberg.
I said Blumberg. Well, I'm pronouncing it in the old country dialect.
He's pronouncing it in the Latvian way. That's where my father immigrated.
Yes.
Bloomberg.
From. That's right. But I really appreciate both of your time. It's been a pleasure. I could sit here and talk to y'all for hours.
Yeah. You should really see it.
So it'll be a documentary from the 1920s for anyone who's not familiar with Vertov, but he kind of considered one of the fathers of editing as well.
Yeah, we watched it in college because I went to a great film school and that's the great culture.
Right. We've got places to be and people to see, and thank you.
Our listeners don't have that many hours.
You don't know that.
They could.
They could. You never know. Alex, I want to ask what's on your wall behind you, because it's in Russian. I see that.
That's Vertov, man with the movie camera.
Oh, yeah, okay, because it's like glaring at the bottom. So just say, I see the Chilovek. I see it. Okay, there we go.
That's a great poster.
I love it.
You guys can't see it because this is an audio medium. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's a great poster.